When Britain declared war in September 1939, its army rolled into battle confident in its weapons. Nearly every cruiser and infantry tank carried the QF 2-pounder gun. The name sounds quaint now, like something from a much earlier era. But it was simple. It fired a 40mm shell that weighed just 2 pounds. On paper, the strategy was sound. In the late 1930s, British military thinking prized speed and maneuverability above all else. Tanks weren't meant for static duels. They were designed to exploit breakthroughs, to slice through enemy lines with speed and precision, outflanking heavier, slower machines. The 2-pounder, adopted in 1938, seemed perfect for this. Trials showed it could punch through 50mm of armour at typical combat ranges. More than enough to handle the Panzer IIs and early Panzer IIs Germany had field-tested in Spain. It fired fast, a dozen rounds a minute in ideal conditions, and was light enough for the compact turrets British designers favoured. On the firing ranges, everything looked perfect. But war doesn't happen on a test range. In May 1940, as British armour advanced into Belgium and France, theory collided with a brutal reality. Tank crews quickly discovered that German panzers were not the flimsy targets they expected. The Panzer III, the Wehrmacht's workhorse, now had 30mm of frontal armour. This was manageable up close, but real combat rarely happened at textbook distances. Engagements were fought at 800, 1,000, even 1,200 yards. At those ranges, the 2-pounder solid shot just didn't have the energy to penetrate. British gunners watched in disbelief as their rounds bounced harmlessly off German steel, each impact a metallic ping that would haunt them through the campaign. Even worse, the gun had no high-explosive shell. Rigid, outdated British doctrine assumed tanks would only ever fight other tanks. No one had planned for them to support infantry, demolish obstacles, or engage soft targets. It could do one job, and by 1940 it couldn't even do that job well. The Germans, however, had no such limitations. Their Panzer IV's 75mm gun fired both armour-piercing and high-explosive rounds, capable of blasting through walls, scattering infantry, or killing tanks. After the miraculous but devastating evacuation at Dunkirk, Britain was stripped of its tanks and heavy weapons. In the frantic race to rearm, the 2-pounder remained standard issue for one simple reason. It could be mass-produced quickly, and nothing better was ready. The 6-pounder, its designated successor, was still just a set of blueprints. Retooling factories in the midst of a national crisis was impossible, and so the little 2-pounder soldiered on, bolted into the turrets of new Matildas, Crusaders, and Valentines. By late 1940, reports from North Africa confirmed what France had already made painfully clear. German armour was getting thicker, and Britain's tanks were falling behind. By late 1942, the battlefield had changed beyond recognition. The Germans had unleashed a monster, the Tigers It carried armour thicker than anything the Allies had ever faced, and at its heart was a weapon that struck terror into tank crews across the front. A gun derived from the fearsome 88mm anti-aircraft cannon. The winter of 1942 in Tunisia became the crucible where British crews faced this new reality. Their first confirmed Tiger kill came on January 19, 1943. But the victory came at a terrible cost. A Churchill tank had to close to within 200 yards, practically grenade throwing. Distant sand fire 7.76mm rounds into the Tiger's rear armour before finally punching through. That single engagement told British tankers everything they needed to know. Against a Tiger, a frontal attack was suicide. Crews developed desperate tactics. Shoot the tracks to immobilize it, sneak around for a flank shot, aim for the gun sight, or just pray the German crew made a mistake. These weren't tactics. They were acts of survival. By February 1943, reports from British armoured regiments were grimly similar. We need a gun that can kill these things from the front, or we must stop sending tanks against them at all. Then came even worse news. Intelligence confirmed Germany's latest creation, a new medium tank called the Panther. It mounted a high-velocity 75mm gun and featured frontal armour over 80mm thick, angled so sharply it was effectively 120mm. The Panther combined the Tiger's near invulnerability with speed and agility. And unlike the Tiger, it would be built by the thousand. For British tank designers, it was a nightmare. They weren't just losing the arms race. They were being left completely behind. By mid-1943, morale in British armoured units was plummeting. Veterans of North Africa now faced invading Europe against an enemy whose medium tanks could outgun Britain's best machines. New recruits, briefed on the power of German tanks, started requesting transfers to the infantry or artillery anywhere. Their chances seemed slightly better. Inside the War Office, panic met paralysis. The answer, in theory, already existed. The 17-pounder gun. But turning theory into reality was another matter. The gun was massive, powerful, and unforgiving. Its recoil was enormous, and British tank turrets were simply too small to hold it. Every attempt to mount it on existing vehicles led to impossible engineering problems. Stopgap solutions were tried, but none were practical for mass deployment. Meanwhile, the plans for D-Day moved forward, and everyone in command knew the truth. Their tanks would land in France with guns that couldn't reliably kill the enemy. The story of the 17-pounder had begun back in May 1941. The Directorate of Artillery correctly predicted that German tanks would soon outgrow the 6-pounder's capabilities. The new gun's specifications were staggering. A 76.2mm weapon capable of punching through 130mm of armour at 1,000 yards. The laws of physics were merciless. Higher velocity required more propellant and a longer barrel. The 17-pounder's barrel would end up over 4 meters long, a tube of high-tensile steel containing chamber pressures exceeding 20 tons per square inch. Prototype trials began in late 1941. The towed version, the Ordnance QF 17-pounder, stunned observers by shredding captured panzer armor as if it were tin. Its new ammunition, the armor-piercing discarding sabot round, or a PDS, was a marvel. A light aluminum sheath carried a dense tungsten core that, once fired, shed its casing and struck the target at over 1,200 meters per second. At those speeds, nothing on the battlefield could stand in its way. Production was approved in late 1942. The first guns reached the Royal Artillery in February 1943 and proved devastating as towed anti-tank weapons in Tunisia. On February 27th, at Hunt's Gap, a single 17-pounder battery destroyed 5 Tigers, 3 from over 1,500 yards away. For the first time, German crews who had once laughed at British guns found themselves vulnerable. But static guns couldn't lead an advance. What Britain needed was a tank-mounted version, and that's where the real engineering nightmare began. The Cromwell, Britain's newest cruiser tank, had a turret ring just 54 inches wide. The 17-pounder needed at least 60. Redesigning the hull would take a year and a half. Time Britain didn't have Normandy was coming. The breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. The American M4 Sherman, supplied in huge numbers through Lend-Lease. Its turret ring was a spacious 69 inches. Perfect. In January 1944, an emergency program was proposed to fit the 17-pounder into Sherman hulls. The idea sounded absurd. The gun was too large, its recoil too violent, but desperation is the mother of innovation. The conversion, nicknamed the Firefly, came with harsh compromises. The radio had to be moved to the hull. The loader worked in near darkness, cramped between the recoil guard and the breech. The tank became nose-heavy and awkward to drive. The muzzle brake blasted such a violent signature that German gunners could spot a Firefly the instant it fired. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that, at last, Britain had a tank that could kill a Tiger frontally at range. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into military history, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content just like this. See you in the next one.